Happy New Year and welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and massive movie ranking lists. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're doing something a little bit different. As we move into 2025, I wanted to take a quick look back at all the films I've covered over the past couple of years, and I figured what more fun way to do it than with a tier list. I did this way back on the channel's 2-year anniversary with the first 80 films I've covered, and today I'm ranking 80 more horror films. Some are big franchises, some are absolute classics, some are hidden gems, and some are straight up pieces of crap. I'll be building this list in Tier Maker, and it will include films I covered 2 years ago like The Perfection, all the way up to my newest review, which actually hasn't come out yet, Street Trash. It'll have 6 themed tiers from S to F, going from masterpieces all the way to bottom barrel pictures. I'll be considering their technical qualities, their originality, their impact, but my rankings will primarily be based around how much I like and appreciate the films. I'll be using the tiers to create general levels of different quality, and then I'll also be ranking them within the tiers as well. I did not pre-rank all of these films or anything. I don't really know what the final product is gonna look like. Looking back at the films, there was not that many bad ones, so I'm kind of worried it's gonna be top heavy towards good, but we'll see. And as usual with tier lists and rankings, there's always gonna be a few things you disagree with. Don't get pissed off, it's a YouTube ranking video. Just try to have some fun, and if you do disagree with something I put in here, feel free to let me know, but just do it politely down in the comments. And just a couple more notes, I'll be including the first 4 Texas Chainsaw films on here since I've reviewed them so far, but I still plan to review the rest of the franchise on the channel and rank them in the future. And of course, this won't cover the first 80 films I reviewed, so if you want to see my rankings for Hellraiser, Child's Play, Halloween, and Hannibal Lecter, be sure to check out the other ranking video that I've linked here. And finally, I've actually only reviewed 68 films on the channel since this last ranking, and that seemed like a really random number. I didn't want to wait to do this list, so I've added 12 other films that I've recently watched to the end of the list. They're all horror films and all pretty relevant, certainly things that I could cover on the channel sometime, so you can consider it cheating, but let's just call it a fun surprise. I have reviewed all of them on Letterboxd, be sure to go follow me there, so there is some kind of review in existence. But hey, with all of that said, it's probably time we start ranking some movies.
Hey, will somebody please pass the ketchup?
This is a tasty burger.
I'll take a Gordon's burger and a side of Jason fingers.
Don't skimp on the meat. I got a real good eye for prime meat.
Okay, we're over here in Tier Maker now, where I've got 3 different tiers that essentially describe how I feel about the films. At the very bottom, we've got Garbage Day for the absolutely bottom barrel garbage movies that, if it were up to me, I would probably not watch again. Right above that, we have Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, which are still not very good films. They have a bit more merit than Garbage Day, but still things that are ultimately going to be a lot of crappy sequels within big franchises, things like that that really don't stand out on their own in any great way. Then we have They're Here, which are essentially C-tier films. They're fine, they're okay films, usually pretty competently made, but they're not movies I feel particularly passionate about and really just kind of feel muddled and in the middle and also don't really stand out amongst all the other great films out there. Then breaking into the top half, we have Welcome to Prime Time, bitch, which is really the start of the good films. These are going to be solid movies with great technical aspects, components that I really enjoy, but still probably some flaws that keep them out of the real upper echelon. Then at the second highest, we have Such Sights to Show You, which are really going to be fantastic horror films. Maybe not quite masterpieces, but still some of the greatest of all times, movies that I could put on at any given moment and have a really great time and enjoy. And then at the very tippy top is What's Your Favorite Scary Movie? This is the peak horror films that have stood the test of time. I have a special place in my heart particularly, and the films I would consider to be the greatest of all time. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into the rankings. So I've got the films here in pretty much chronological order from how I've covered them on the channel. So we've got the oldest review I've done on here, which is The Perfection, which goes through all the different movies I had covered after that, takes us into the Friday the 13th franchise, some more random patron requests and things like that. And then we eventually get into the Phantasm series, and then more patron requests and other fun themed movies. I've got the Texas Chainsaw, the first 4 films near the end, and then that will be followed by the 12 other horror movies I've watched very recently. So we'll get to those last though. But yeah, starting off with The Perfection, I am probably going to put that in, and we'll start it off in Welcome to Primetime, bitch. This one, it's pretty solid. It is a strange mystery kind of thriller. If you haven't seen it, I'm not gonna try to spoil it for you today. I think it's definitely worth a watch, as you definitely don't know where this movie's going. I'll just say that much. I think it was actually a little hard on it in my review of it, but I do think there's a lot of really strong elements here, and it's a great mystery. Up next is The Burning, and I think we're gonna have to put this one maybe right before The Perfection. The Burning, it's a classic 80s slasher. Cropsey is he's not, I guess maybe he's not like an icon, but he is a well-known within the horror community, has a few really great scares, some gross practical effects going on. You don't get to see his face much, but when you do, it's pretty good. And I love it as a summer camp slasher. It feels much more like a summer camp movie than even most of the Friday the 13th films. So yeah, I think it's definitely earned its place. There are some quality issues from time to time that might keep it out of the A and S tier, but I think you got a young George Costanza here. What's not to love? Up next is Scanners, and yeah, this one is probably gonna make its way into the A tier. We have Such Sights to Show You. It's not my favorite Cronenberg, but I don't really hate many Cronenberg films. It has a lot of really memorable moments. That head explosion is an all-time kind of kill. Such fun practical effects. And then, yeah, just a strange world that Cronenberg has built out here. It's one of the ones that stands out to me for the strange society of scanners that exist out there. And you get to see a lot of them. Not all of them get to show off their weird scanner powers, but of the main characters, you get to see a lot of strange powers, which is really just fun. Fun's kind of a fucked up, not kind of fucked up, but it's an odd way to describe Scanners. It's not necessarily a fun movie, but it's much more action-based than many Cronenberg films are. So it gives you a lot of explosions and exciting movement through the film. Oh God, up next we have Killer Workout. This was a patron request from Uncle Pete. Pete, I'm sorry. I think I'm gonna have to put it down and be very afraid. I had a lot of fun covering it on the channel, and I had a lot of fun watching it, but when I'm comparing it to all of the other films on this list, it is a very shoestring budget, poorly acted, not especially coherent plot, not especially likable characters. There is some fun to the mystery of who is killing people in this gym/spa, and the twist ending is kind of fun, but I think it's kind of in the same vein as like maybe one of those really bad sleepaway camp sequels where it is kind of so bad it's good, but it's not genuinely good. But if you love a good schlocky C-tier horror movie, I think that you would have a lot of fun with this one. So now we're getting to Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. This one's tough because Halloween Ends really tainted how much I actually enjoyed Halloween Kills. I feel like I was one of those rare people that actually really enjoyed Kills, and in my review, if you go watch it, I really stood up for the film. I thought it had so many great kills especially, but I didn't dislike the bad parts of it as much as most people did. But then Ends really just kind of shits the bed. So I am putting Ends in Garbage Day, and then I used to have, I believe in my previous ranking, I kept it in here because my ranking of it has changed so drastically because of Ends that I am gonna put it down in probably there here. I think I still can enjoy that film on its own. It has a great Halloween-y, spooky, very violent vibe. It's kind of filling the same niche as maybe like Terrifier in some capacity for me. But Ends, I just think is unwatchable crap. I do not care about Corey Cunningham. I think all of it's so stupid. And I really didn't like Halloween 2018 that much because Laurie's trauma and all of that was just so over the top and silly. I thought Kills was a nice kind of bringing, I think it's a nice middle point between what's going on in both films and lets Michael be the star of the show. So for me, that's my favorite out of this trilogy, but Ends really has tainted my view of both of those films, unfortunately. But hey, up next is Hellraiser from 2022, and I'm putting this one, I'm gonna put it in Welcome to Primetime, bitch, and I'm gonna have it at the tip top right there. I enjoyed this one so much. I think it was such a fantastic return to form for the Hellraiser franchise. I think it is probably one of the most effective films when it comes to capturing the kind of euphoria and sexuality of the Cenobites, and it really just brought so many cool new characters as far as the Cenobites go into here. The human characters are pretty lacking though. They're not the most exciting or likable or compelling. I think the big bad villain at the end is probably my least favorite part of the film. But that being said, there's still so much going on here. I absolutely love David Bruckner and really all of his films. So I think he really still brought a lot of great to this new project. I don't know if we're ever going to get a sequel to it. I don't know if I want to or not. When I had first seen the film, I really wanted some follow-ups, but I think it functions well maybe as just its own individual piece, but I guess time will tell. Up next, we have The Untamed. This is a Spanish-speaking horror movie from Mexico, and now I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's a very sexual movie. It deals with sexuality, a lot of cultural tensions, and okay, spoiler, there's a tentacle alien a lot like Possession. So yeah, it's an interesting combination of politics as well as body horror, and yeah, it was an interesting film. I think that it borrows a lot from Possession, especially in the creature itself, but I think it takes it into some interesting new places. It was a very slow burn kind of film, but I think I think for this film, it makes a lot of sense for what they're going for, and it was very moody and atmospheric. And yeah, the characters were all either likable or very compelling in what they were doing. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and put it in. Okay, we'll put it here at Welcome to Primetime. I think the B tier is probably going to be one of the biggest ones here today. But yeah, I think it earns that place. There's nothing really wrong with the film. I think that maybe it goes on a little longer than it needs to, but I think that there are some really shocking moments in here, and I think it really is firing on all cylinders in regards to what it's trying to accomplish. Up next we have Tenebrae. I think this is the only Argento on the list, and I don't think this is going to come as a surprise to too many people, but I'm going to put this one up in A. Do I put it above Scanners or not? I think I'm gonna put Tenebrae above Scanners ever so slightly, if Tiermaker will let me. There we go. Yeah. There are just so many really great moments in Tenebrae. That final act is absolutely batshit crazy, but before that, it is a pretty compelling mystery. The usual kind of giallo suspects are in there. You get the black gloves, the straight razor, a little bit of that magic that comes in with most of Argento. Some really crazy shots of buildings, the architecture, all of those things you would come to expect in an Argento film. And yeah, I think this is one of his very best. I wouldn't say it's quite Suspiria level, but it's right up there. Up next we have a potentially divisive one with Hollow Man. I actually really enjoyed this upon my review, and I think I enjoy it a bit more than the average person. If I remember correctly, it had pretty bad reviews, but I think it works really well for, it's maybe more of an action thriller kind of horror, but there are some really horrific moments in here. I don't remember Kevin Bacon's character's name, but he does some really awful things here. There are some flaws. The plot's not the most compelling, and it's a very familiar storyline, but the effects are fucking fantastic. And yeah, it works really well. And that final kind of finale fight sequence and all of the just really great effects going on are super memorable. So I think I'm also going to put this one into Welcome to Prime Time, maybe at the bottom, because there are some issues with it being really familiar. You kind of know where the story's going to go, but I think it serves its purpose pretty well, and those effects I think really deserve more love than they get. Ooh, okay, up next we have Flatliners, and this one's kind of tricky because it is a horror movie, but it's also not really a horror movie. It's not really scary most of the time. There's a few interesting scenes like the one on the train and different things like that, but it's much more of a drama thriller kind of thing. But as far as the quality of film, it's very solid. You've got a really, really kick-ass cast here, all really, maybe a couple like, I don't want to say past their prime, but you've got actors after they've been in some really, really big roles. This is a really strong cast of young actors, and they're doing a good job with what they're given. I think, yeah, once again, I think it's not the most scary film in the world, but I think it is still solid. So I'm also gonna put it in B tier, probably like right here, I think makes sense. Yeah, I can stand by that. Ooh, up next we have The Orphanage. This one is a co-production between Spain and Mexico, and I think J.A. Bayona is the director, and it was produced by Guillermo del Toro, so really a lot of talent behind this one. And yeah, it is a really lovely is kind of a weird way to phrase it kind of film. It's super tragic and sad. It's one of those films that actually gets really heartfelt and can bring a tear to your eye in a really genuine way. And yeah, it's a really, really great film. It has some good scares in it, especially maybe in the first half, but it isn't necessarily like a out to scare you horror movie. But if you haven't seen it, I absolutely recommend it. And I think it's going to also make its way into A tier here. I don't know if it's quite like Tenebrae and Scanners level, but it is really a lovely film. Ooh, up next we have The Sacrament. This is a found footage horror movie. Yeah, really following a cult out in, I think it still takes place in South America. It is basically a retelling of the Jonestown Massacre, and yeah, has kind of a weird place in my heart when it comes to that, because it is such kind of a straightforward retelling of those events. You've got the enigmatic cult leader, all of the followers who are tricked into unaliving themselves, and yeah, it comes with all of that. It is really a brutal kind of watch in that way. It's kind of hard to stomach. There are some really gut-wrenching moments in there, but from a technical standpoint, I would say Ty West does a great job. It isn't necessarily him behind the camera most of the time. They have the actors, it's found footage, they're holding the cameras most of the time. But yeah, I think it does a great job of hiding things from you because their main characters aren't seeing everything happening here. But yeah, great push and pull of finding out secrets, not knowing things. So it is effective, and I think it's going to go into Welcome to Primetime as well. I think I'll put it maybe right here makes sense. Okay, up next is The Shining. I'm not gonna sit here and waste anybody's time. This is the first one to go into what's your favorite scary movie. This is an all-timer kind of film. If you don't like The Shining, I don't know what to tell you. It's a fucking fantastic film. You need to go try to learn how to like it, because you're wrong if you don't think it's good. I can understand if you think it's a poor adaptation of the book, but I think that that's different than it being a bad film. Yeah, just so much great work by Stanley Kubrick in here. Great job by all of the cast as well, and just the set design speaks for itself. The hallways, the patterns, the fucking hedges, everything is so good, and it deserves its spot right up there. But yeah, that brings us into the Friday the 13th franchise, and this is where I'm probably gonna upset some people. So once again, take these with a grain of salt. If it's your favorite franchise, if it's your favorite movie of all time in here, I'm so sorry. I think it's a super fun franchise, but they're not the best films. So I'm gonna try to do these kind of rapid fire, I think, and I might be moving them around a little bit, but my gut tells me the original Friday goes up in B. Let's see, let me stick it next to the Burning for now. Those seem really equivalent. I actually like part 2 more than part 1, but still think it's gonna go into prime time. Part 3, oh man, I think it also goes in here, but I think I also kind of like it more than 1. I know that might be kind of blasphemous, but I think it's dumb, good fun. Final Chapter goes up into A. A New Beginning, that's gonna go down into there here. Jason Lives, definitely into We Have Such Sights to Show You. The New Blood, this is gonna be one that's gonna upset some people. It's going down into D. There's still a lot of issues that I'll try to get into with a moment, but sorry, it's going down into F. It's not a good movie. It's not a good Jason movie. It's the worst that this franchise has to offer. It's just dull, uninteresting, ugly to watch. Need I go on? This is one that's also gonna maybe upset some people, but I think, where do I want to put the Final Friday? I'm somewhere in between Be Very Afraid and Garbage Day. I don't know, it's unique enough. You know what, screw it. Let's put it in Be Very Afraid. I think that it's at least trying something very unique, so I can't put it in the Garbage Day, but I do not think it's very good at what it's trying to do most of the time. Jason X, I want to like Jason X more, but I don't. It's kind of fun. It has some really fun kills. It's fun. I don't want to pretend it's not fun, but it's also, there's other Fridays that are a lot more fun than this one that are also better than this one. Freddy vs. Jason, I think is also B tier, but so it's not my favorite. There's some, like, the final sequence is great. There's some great kills throughout, but there's a lot of padding runtime and just a lot of them running around, driving places, not the most interesting stuff. Then we have the remake, or the reboot, I should say. We'll put that in there here as well. I think it is doing this new kind of Jason well, but it's a little more mean-spirited and loses a lot of the campy fun that I love about this franchise. So it kind of just turns into a generic slasher movie at that point. So to round that off, so we've got Jason Lives up top, which I think makes sense for it, right? Followed very closely behind the Final Chapter. They're both in the A tier. Then we have 2, 3, 1, and Freddy vs. Jason in the B tier, which I think is a very fair place for most of these. I could see an argument for maybe 2, or even if you're a kind of a purist, 1 going into A, but I think both still have a lot of technical issues. 2, I'm really close to putting it up there, but I think it's not quite there. I'll put it maybe like top of B tier. I think that's fair. And then, yeah, that seems good enough, whatever. Sorry if you really hate part 3. I know the 3D is kind of nauseating, but when I went through and ranked the kills for the franchise, 3 had so many standouts that if you're hoping for that component from a Jason film, I think it's a hard one to beat. So I think it does earn its spot. And then down in C tier, we've got The New Beginning and The Reboot, which I think is fine. I could understand if you have either of them lower. I think A New Beginning gets more hate than it deserves because of Roy Burns, but I think before his reveal, it's a pretty solid Jason movie. And then The Reboot, I think, is it's fine. It's a decent slasher. There's some cool kills in there. Jason is very ferocious and scary. That really long opening sequence is super effective and could have functioned as its own short film. So it definitely has some good components, but then it feels more just like a speed run of the first couple of Friday movies as they try to fit everything in, and that just, it all feels super rushed and not very fleshed out. Then we've got Part 7. Part 7 has some really high highs, but it has a lot more muddling things and a lot of low lows. Jason obviously looks badass here. Kane Hodder is badass here. But then I just don't care for all of the psychic powers, the goober ass dad coming out at the end and saving his daughter. There's just a lot of dumb, cheesy things as well. And it just feels like a shitty Carrie knockoff. And then we have Jason X. It's Jason X, need I say more? And then, yeah, Manhattan is kind of, and then Jason Goes to Hell. I can understand if you have this in F tier or maybe even a tier or two higher, but there's some fun, very fun, campy components here, but I just think all of the retconning to turn Jason into an evil hell worm is just, it's too much too fast and doesn't gel with everything else that's come before it. And then Manhattan's kind of just like the worst version of a Friday the 13th movie. It doesn't have the camp setting, but the setting also isn't cool like Jason X or even Jason Goes to Hell. It just feels like a bunch of boring but also bad decisions. So yeah, that's vaguely how I'd rank the Friday franchise. All right, up next we have Prince of Darkness, and I'm gonna put this one into We Have Such Sights to Show You. And this one's pretty good. I'll put it like right here. Out of all the reviews I've ever done, there's two films that I've reviewed that people go and bitch about the fucking most, and one is Hannibal. People just love to bother me on my Hannibal review because I like mistake locations in Italy and other things like that. The Italy plot is boring. No one cares about it. Get over it. But the other one is fucking Prince of Darkness because I made a few passing comments about how some of the jokes don't age well and things like that. Super soft little critiques about a film that I generally said was very fucking good, and they get so fucking mad. I get it, guys. I love John Carpenter too. Halloween is in my very, very favorite list of films. The Thing is my number 2 film of all time. Prince of Darkness is also really solid and has really great things going on, but I don't know, the band of homeless people that have been turned, like there's just lots of weird decisions here that are just odd, and I think it makes for a very interesting, unique film, but they're just not things that I personally find that interesting or compelling, and it keeps it out of that tippy top for me when it comes to Carpenter films and horror films in general. So I'm so sorry to those people who love this film, but I think it's an A-tier film. I think it's really solid. So you're gonna have to take that and you're gonna have to enjoy it. Up next we have Deathgasm, a super fun horror comedy, definitely paying homage to things like Brain Dead or Return of the Living Dead, like youth in revolt, fighting zombies and the undead kind of deal. And yeah, it's super fun. I think it's not, there's like some critiques I have about it as far as some of the humor goes. It's really kind of muddled, especially in the middle of the film, but overall I think it's a pretty solid horror comedy, and I think I'll put it like maybe like near the end of the B tier, which is quickly swelling up to be the biggest of the bunch so far. I might eventually move some things down to there here, but I'll wait a little bit to do that. So yeah, I think that's a good place for it to go though. Ooh, up next we have Possum. This is definitely a film that's not gonna be for everyone. This is like capital A art house filmmaking. It is super atmospheric, very few actual dialogue between characters. You're mostly hearing the lead's inner dialogue or him talking to himself, but I love the look of these swampy estuaries that the character is exploring. It's both a very conceptual kind of space, but also just beautiful landscape shots. The puppet Possum is absolute nightmare fuel, and it really makes the film for me. I think a lot hinged on that puppet, but it serves its purpose super well. So yeah, I'm gonna put it up in the A tier as well. Ooh, this one's tricky. Up next is Scream 6. This one's tricky because I, one, have not done official reviews of all the other films on the channel. This is one very quick spoiler-free review I did when the film first came out. And there is, I don't know, it's interesting because I really enjoyed Scream 5 and 6. I thought it was a wonderful revamping of the story, and I thought taking it into New York, all the things they did with it was super fun. The villains were maybe like extra cheesy this time around, like a lot, they were camping it up at the end there, but I thought it was all like good, dumb, violent fun. And Ghostface was really fucking scary, at least in like the first 2/3 of this film. And I was really excited to see where Scream 7 was gonna go. But then there was a lot of political stuff that went down. One of the lead actresses, I believe it's Melissa Barrera. I'm so sorry if I'm getting that name wrong. I'm blanking right now, but was protesting for Palestine, and basically the production company was like, no, they've cut her out. I think a lot of the other actors have left the production because of that, and now they are scrambling to make some ragtag finale to this that doesn't involve most of these characters. I think they managed to get Neve Campbell back, but I don't know. It's going to be a fucking Corey Campbell situation where we're going to be following like Sidney Prescott's daughter or something, because they just blew it so fucking much because they wanted to like play politics in that way. Yeah. So it's kind of tainted my excitement for whatever's coming next, as well as just my appreciation for the production company involved in this. But that being said, I want to just think about it from the actors, the director, the people who actually made the film. And I think Scream 6 is really solid, but maybe still not my favorite Scream film. I wouldn't put it above at least a good half of the franchise. So I'll put it somewhere also pretty decently high in the B tier. Let's just go and put it like right here for now. I might move it around later though. Up next, we got Basket Case. This one is going straight to the A tier. I don't think I can justify putting it in S. It's one of my personal favorite horror movies, but I can absolutely acknowledge that there's some issues with it. But yeah, it's a really fun grassroots filmmaking in the middle of New York in the fucking 80s when everything was grimy and sleazy and covered in a layer of filth. And it's just a really authentic picture of the city at that time. And Belial is one of my favorite horror movie monsters of all time. The stop motion puppetry, the crazy fucking screaming that they have him doing is just so much fun. And it's trashy, like really sleazy in a way that I really enjoy. We're gonna get to at least a movie or two that I think push the sleaze and the ultra violence and the use of sex in ways that go a little too far for me. Whereas I think Basket Case is that perfect spot for me of sleazy, but not to the point of it being really gross and exploitative. Ooh, up next we have the Midnight Meat Train. Oh, this is such a fun one. I feel like it's kind of insane to put the Midnight Meat Train in A, but I kind of want to. I don't think I can quite justify it though. I think there's enough I don't know. I really enjoy the Midnight Meat Train. It's like dumb as fuck. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, but it's super gruesome and depressing for like the first half, and then it goes into a bizarre direction. I will not spoil what that final direction is, but it does something super strange that I kind of really appreciate. So fuck it, let's put it in A tier for now. I don't know if it'll stay there, but I think it's an odd movie to see. What's his fucking face? Bradley Cooper in this, of all things, is just so fucking funny to me. Ooh, The People Under the Stairs, definitely going in A. I think we'll put it somewhere right over here. I think that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, such a great Wes Craven movie. I think really shows off just it's a great synthesis of all the things he cares about. There's a lot of politics involved here, a lot of really dark humor, and yeah, so much concept that doesn't get in the way of story, and story doesn't get in the way of concept, which I think is really hard to do. And I think it's really done well here. I love all of the characters here, both oh dang it, I'm blanking on the lead kid's name, but also both of the villains as well. It's just a bunch of super dynamic characters interacting with each other. It has a little bit of like Home Alone vibes at times, which isn't necessarily my favorite thing. I think it gets a little goofy, just a tad bit too goofy at times, which is kind of a Wes Craven thing. He pushes that humor to sometimes an area that goes a little far for me, but I think it still works really well within the context of this film. Ooh, finally another S-tier movie with an American Werewolf in London. If not it's one of the very best werewolf films of all time. Crazy practical effects, just so many fantastic moments. For Christmas, I actually got one of the nightmare werewolves from the dream sequence that happens in the film. It's really dark in here, so you can't see him super well, but I'm super pumped about him. He's joining Leatherface over here. And yeah, just a fantastic werewolf film. If you have not seen it, go give it a watch. Ooh, here's another tricky one. Up next is The House That Jack Built, and this is another film that's super divisive. Some people consider it a masterpiece. Some people think of it as an irreprehensible piece of misogynistic garbage. And it's kind of both. It's a lot. For those who don't know about Lars von Trier, he's a passionate, troubled man who essentially makes films about his own issues, dilemmas, fears, and shortcomings, which I think makes for really authentic, interesting filmmaking. And technically speaking, he's a fantastic filmmaker, but you are really watching him go through different ideas through these characters where he's like almost the protagonist. And in the case of The House That Jack Built, he's a really terrible guy. And I'm not saying that he believes everything that Jack is saying or anything like that, but there are a lot of people that do not like this film because I think it views women in a very dehumanizing light. And it's strange because they try to make Jack likable, but also like not at all. It's so complex. I think people get very different readings from this film. I am gonna put it in B tier because I think technically speaking, it's a very well-made movie. I am certainly uncomfortable with some of the components of it, but you're meant to be uncomfortable. This is not supposed to be a fun watch. I think some people are kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum where they like love this movie and kind of glorify Jack in a gross way. So it's just complex, but I shouldn't let that decide my own ranking of it. So I think I'll have it in B for now. I think it is a good spot for it. It's not a film I feel especially passionate about. It's not like I would ever decide to watch it on my own because it's a rough watch, and it's not something I would really put on for friends either unless it was under a very specific context. So it's a film you have to visit for a specific reason, I feel like. Kind of in a similar sense, up next is Antiviral. This was, I believe it was the feature-length debut of Brandon Cronenberg, son of David Cronenberg, who's gone on to make films that are kind of like sequel films to his father's. They're always usually in this strange, futuristic, sci-fi kind of world where people are kind of losing touch with humanity and relying on technology and entertainment and things like that to find more meaning in life. In Antiviral, it's a really hard plot to make a quick synopsis of, but the world itself, like people are growing skin and organ and tissues using the cells of, say, their favorite celebrities, and there's people trying to steal those cells and espionage and things like that taking place. And it's a very strange film. It's super unique and fits right into that Cronenberg kind of atmosphere. I think I'm gonna put it I think it'll go in B as well. I think it's not my favorite Brandon Cronenberg film. I would put Possessor above it. I would put the one with Mia Goth in front of it. I'm blanking on the name right now, but this one's like full on depressing like most of the time. It's not the most fun watch in the world, but I think it's it's got a lot of mystery and some small twists throughout, so I think it is effective at what it's doing. Ooh, up next is Shocker, and I think I might upset some more people here, but I think Shocker is gonna go down into there here. For me, it's kind of a middle of the road slasher film. I love Wes Craven, but this is not one of my favorites from him. I think it is kind of just like a retread of a lot of what he did with Freddy already. I think there's some unique stuff, especially in that final third act where they're jumping channels and going in and out of reality through the TV. And there's some really interesting effects happening. And I love, I'm blanking on the actor's name, but the character of Horace Pinker, I think he brings a nice edge to it. He's not like too goofy like you might expect for what kinds of powers he ultimately gets. He's still pretty scary, which is nice, but yeah, I think that there's just a lot of slashers that I would put above Shocker. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it kind of middle of the road here. Ooh, up next we have Brain Dead, otherwise known as Dead Alive, and I think this one's gonna go into S tier. I think that this is another one that is definitely on the ultra violent, ultra gory side of filmmaking, and also still very humorous and fun, kind of like an even more batshit version of something like Basket Case. And I think it's gone on to be super influential, and especially when it comes to the special effects. So there's so many crazy effects that happen in this, from the zombie baby, the insane monstrous mother at the end, so many just gross out moments as well, like the yellow splooge into, I don't know if it's like porridge or whatever they're eating. Ugh, so gross. And yeah, a really likable but troubled protagonist and really fun love interest kind of angle. And yeah, super fun. It's dumb, good, gory fun. Nice. Up next, we have the Abominable Dr. Phibes, and this is kind of tricky. It's like maybe the second oldest film on this list by a pretty fair margin. I think the only one that out-olds it is Rosemary's Baby, which is coming up soon, but it's definitely like different qualities as far as what was available at the time, as far as practical effects. It's very much still in that vein of classic horror movies. Like, it would feel relatively at home amongst Dracula and Frankenstein. There's still more kind of contemporary subject matter in there, and Phibes is doing things very differently than those characters do for sure, but it feels reminiscent of something. It's an old soul kind of horror movie, and it's not something I think a lot of really young audiences today could necessarily get into, but as someone who really enjoys the history of horror, I had a ton of fun with it, and watching the doctor's insane kinds of traps. It's almost like a really proto Saw movie, which is super cool. And yeah, a really interesting revenge flick. I still haven't watched the sequels to it yet, so I don't know if it really gets off the rails, but yeah, I think I'll go ahead and put it in, I don't know, I'll put it in a really low A, I think, as I think it has some really strong elements in there. I wish certain things like the practical effects for the final face reveal were a little bit better, but I think it does a really good job at telling this story of revenge through a very mysterious kind of angle. Ooh, up next is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and this might upset some of you people, but this is going in S tier as well. I think bottom of S tier, but I think it deserves that spot for sure. I think it's one of my favorite pieces of 2010s horror by a lot. It is just such a piece of art in every way, from the cinematography, the use of black and white, the just political storytelling, the really conceptual little details in a lot of the locations and the relationships between characters. It is similar to The Orphanage, and like the way I describe it, it's a lovely film. It is, yeah, just a story I can really get behind. If you haven't seen it, absolutely go watch it. And I think it's one of the ones, like I'd say, go watch my review of it as well if you'd like a bit of a breakdown of it and some of its cultural relevance, because I think it's a wonderful film that has a lot to say. Up next is Rosemary's Baby. Roman Polanski's a dirty piece of shit, but it's a fantastic film. I can't pretend it's not. I think I'll put it maybe like right behind The Shining here. I mean, it's one of the most referenced or at least imitated horror films that's ever been made. Like Hereditary, for example. I mean, it's basically just Rosemary's Baby with a few little tweaks of who's tricking who and whatnot. There's so many films like it, so many films that have gone on to use the apartment space as like the horror movie setting, the lying partner, the pregnancy related horror. Like so many elements in here work so well. Rosemary makes for such a wonderful protagonist, and you feel so sorry for her as she goes through this. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic piece of filmmaking and one of the best horror movies of all time. All right, but now we're getting into the Phantasm franchise. So I have made a ranking video of these films that happened fairly recently, so they're still pretty fresh on my mind. So if I'm thinking through this in the tier list kind of form, Phantasm, definitely S tier. I think it has a couple little things that, I don't know, it doesn't age super well in some elements, but I think that there's just such a magical, surreal quality to this film that I love to revisit. And yeah, I think that has just such a great villain in the Tall Man, and yeah, just builds out such a likable cast of characters to fight him as well. And those qualities carry into the sequels, but I generally feel like it's a franchise of diminishing returns. I think I'll put Phantasm 2 like pretty low on the A tier, and then Lord of the Dead and Oblivion I think are both gonna be probably like C tier movies. I think that's a pretty good place for them. Yeah, I think I enjoy 4 slightly more than I do 3, but I think they both have some technical issues going on. And then unfortunately, I think I'm gonna put Ravager down in the D tier. I still think it's a really cohesive story, and I love watching Mike, Reggie, and Jody facing off against the Tall Man, but the budget's typically getting lower with each film. The effects are usually getting worse with each film. Angus Scrimm always gives it his very fucking best, but he's aging more and more as the films go on, and he becomes a bit maybe less intimidating. So I don't think the magic of the first film is ever quite captured in the sequels, unfortunately. Okay, but up next is VHS 85. This is, I guess, the second most recent VHS film, if I'm thinking about it correctly. I actually haven't seen Beyond yet, but I've heard really, really good things about it. But as far as VHS 85 goes, it falls into a similar line as the other VHS films, where there's some elements I really like, some elements I really don't like, and then maybe a couple things I feel about. So I think ultimately these films usually leave me somewhere in the middle. So for that reason, I think it's going to go into there here. Yeah, I think that there are a few sequences in there that I really enjoy, but not the vast majority, but at least half of them I just wasn't that impressed with, or yeah, just didn't think it like fully fleshed out the theme of the film. So I think this is a fine place for it. Up next is another weird one with Divinity. This is another like super art house kind of horror film, but also with kind of a Cronenbergian edge, I suppose. Still like kind of fast-paced and sexy while being still really atmospheric and mysterious and art housey. Yeah, some super strange characters in here, and just a very strange world that's been built out. A lot of interesting themes around birth and pregnancy and sex. even like religion, obviously technology. There's a lot of themes around drug use and addiction, but it's juggling a lot of things at once. And for me, I don't think it quite nailed the juggle, and some things felt jumbled up by the end. So I think that this is another one that's gonna go like pretty high C tier. And then Under the Skin, this is a personal favorite of mine, but I think I'm gonna put it in A tier. It's like in a very similar vein as Possum to me. It's super atmospheric, super character driven, as opposed to being really like dialogue driven. There's very little talking throughout this film. You're mostly watching Scarlett Johansson as this alien-esque creature as she's adapting to life as a human. We'll just call it that. And it's a very interesting piece of filmmaking, and it's very grassroots, on feet on the ground kind of approach, just going around in vans and filming big groups of people, a lot of non-actors involved in it. And then the sci-fi moments are really strange and unsettling, and yeah, I think it's super effective at what it's trying to do, but I can definitely understand that if it's just too slow or too mysterious or too abstract for some people to enjoy. So I could understand if you have it lower, but I think it's a really great piece of filmmaking. Up next is one of the most uncomfortable watches I did this year with Compliance. Thank you, Professor Victor. This is the kind of movie that's gonna drive you fucking nuts as you watch the characters make the decisions they make in this film. I don't know if you haven't seen it, maybe Google the plot so you know what's going on. It's a very uncomfortable watch, and it's infuriating at times, but it is based on true events, so that makes it even more awful and sad, but also infuriating. So I think I'm gonna place it in B tier as well. Yeah, we'll put it like here, I think, because I think it does its job really well. It's not really a horror movie in any traditional sense. It's not really gonna scare you at all, but it's horrific in the way that things happen. Okay, up next is Vicious Fun. This is another super fun horror comedy. And I think I'll put this maybe just like right along the lines as Deathgasm. Yeah, don't want to spoil too much, but essentially there's kind of this group of serial killers who get together, and this average Joe fella accidentally stumbles upon them, and hijinks ensue from there. It's got some really fun plays on horror tropes, some really fun dynamic characters, and some very fun violence. It's a really super fun film. I'm sure I've said that enough to get the point across, but yeah, I think that there's a few elements in it that I think could have been done better, but overall I think it serves its purpose well and is, a super fun popcorn kind of flick. Oh, here's another weird ass movie, The Baby. The Baby is a 70s film where there is a family with a grown man who behaves like a baby. If you have not seen it or seen my review, that's all I'm going to give you for now. It is very strange, like exploitation kind of filmmaking. It's also like not super duper horror movie until maybe like the final 10 minutes or so, but yeah, also it's definitely on the strange end of the things that I've watched this year. Thank you, Uncle Pete. And yeah, I think that I will put this, I think I'm gonna put it in B tier as well. It definitely stands out amongst a lot of these films, sort of like in my last ranking video I did De Palma's Sisters. It's in that realm of film, I'll say. It's super strange, not super abstract in this one. It's it's a super straightforward story, but very uncomfortable to watch. But yeah, has a nice mix of scary, sad, funny, but also ultimately just strange and uncomfortable. Ooh, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. This is a tricky one to put on here. It's the only animated film, and obviously being the only animated one, it's the only anime as well. Yeah, this one is a beautiful piece of filmmaking. I think I'm gonna put it, Oh, I think I'm gonna keep it in A tier just because it's not necessarily like a horror movie. It's just getting into semantics here, but it's a beautiful, beautiful film with a really great story that's melding together horror, fantasy, westerns, has such a cool protagonist. But it's, aside from the original Vampire Hunter D, it's the only piece of that story that I've ever watched or read, so I'm a little bit out of the loop when it comes to the other components to it and the character. So it's kind of hard to place amongst these films. It could easily be in the S tier. I think it's one of the very best anime films that I've ever seen, but I think when I'm thinking about it in the lens of greatest horror films, it's doing something kind of different. So I'll put it there, which I think is an okay spot for it to be. Ooh, up next we have Angel Heart. This is another interesting one to put in. I think it's gonna go into like maybe like low A tier as well, though. It is definitely a horror film. I think that it's not really a cuspy movie in some ways, but it certainly is not thriller, but drama, mystery, but I think there's enough horror components to pretty safely call it one. Yeah, two fantastic leads in this one. Really not tit for tat game because one character kind of is pulling the strings the whole time and is in control. You've got Mickey Rourke and Robert De Niro hamming it up at times, but also giving really intense, serious acting at times as well. It's a very dynamic watch, and it's definitely the kind you can rewatch again and again and pick up new little details. And I just love the old New York kind of setting, as well as when they go down to like New Orleans, or I don't know, it might not be New Orleans, but somewhere down in the deep South. Two contrasting locations and just a lot of, great locations, set pieces, characters, and a story that unravels in a way you will probably come to expect. You've probably seen some movies like it, but it's a decent chance that some of those movies you've seen have borrowed from Angel Heart, so it's an important piece of horror history, I think. Up next is Aome, otherwise known as Ravening in English, and this one is an Indian film, and it's the first one I've covered on the channel, and it's, I think I'm gonna put it down in C tier. I think, unfortunately, it was very... It's interesting because it's almost like a rom-com, but not even a rom-com, or just like a romance, and it's not really out to scare you, but the romance in it takes a dark, cannibalistic turn. And from everything I understand, for the area of Assam where this was made, this was like, this is the kind of shit you don't make there. And I don't have a great grasp on the cultural taboos of what you can and can't make in cinemas there, but in the reviews I read that it's doing something that is pushing boundaries there. But when I compare it to other films on even this list, I think that it's not giving me the scares. It wasn't really a convincing romance, in my opinion, as well. And it left something to be desired, especially I love cannibal films, at least some of them, and I think that this one just did not push that element to the degrees I think a lot of other films like Raw or Fresh or even something like The Hills Have Eyes, Wrong Turn, things like that are. It's a very uncomfortable version of it. I don't want to give too much away, but it's also one of my least viewed videos of all time. I think just no one's ever heard of it. So if you're interested in like medical horror, I think you might have some interest in it, but don't expect really a straight up horror movie. Oh, actually, this next film is a pretty good example. Up next is Audition, and this is one that I think blends romance with horror really fucking well, and I think it's a really good film. And it's going straight up to what's your favorite scary movie. I think it is really firing on all cylinders. Takashi Miike at some of his best. It's much more toned down compared to a lot of his other films, but I think it still has those surreal, crazy, violent moments that you expect in one of his films, but yeah, it's much more controlled and knows when to hold back and when to unleash in a really great way. Asami is absolutely fucking terrifying, but also that's one of the videos, I think, go watch my review of it. I think I did a pretty good job talking about it and its themes, and I think a lot of people take it at a very surface value kind of thing when I'm talking about, when you think about the themes, what's this film talking about? It's like, oh yeah, scary, crazy woman. I think there's a lot more going on there, and I think it's, yeah, Mike at some of his most controlled and scary, but also some of his most poignant. Up next is Hereditary, and Hereditary's tricky. I think that it's one of the most divisive films on here as well. People either love it or hate it, and there's almost no in between at all. And at first, when it first came out, even for years after, I think I was definitely in like the group of people that would put it in the S tier. This is one of the best, it's the best thing we've had in a long, long time. But I think my hype around it has waned just a little bit. I think obviously Toni Collette's doing God's work out here. Such a fantastic fucking performance. The set design, the use of the miniatures, there's so many really, really great components going on. But I've come around to some of the critiques as well. In some ways, the characters just feel so detached, and it's hard to really relate to or feel for them due to it. And it is really borrowing a lot from a lot of other films, especially Rosemary's Baby, for example, is a really good example. And it is hard to really follow what's happening in your first watch through of a film, and I think it could have used just a little more laying out of what's going on with Payman, because a lot of people did not understand, and I'm not the sort to just sit here and be like, oh, viewers are stupid, they're not paying attention. If so many people are having an issue, there's a reason for it, and I love a movie that rewards you on a rewatching. You can pick up a lot more, but it's hard to follow in that first watch through, I suppose. But that all being said, it is still a fantastic fucking horror movie. I think it has some of the best scares that we got in the 2010s and even into the 2020s as well. And I think that I would put Midsommar just above this one, but I think that it's one of Ari Aster's very best. And I think he's gotten a little like off the rails. I think I liked him best with his more straight-ish forward horror movies, but I still think this one's really, really solid, and it's definitely going up like high A tier. I think I'll put it right at the cusp right now. Up next is Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, and this is a film that I've had an interesting relationship with. For a while, I kind of dogged on it and shat on it, just like it just didn't really work for me, and I've come around to it more a little bit. It's still not my favorite. It's found footage, not my favorite subgenre in total. Horror comedies I'm really picky about, but I've come to really appreciate the character of Leslie, the meta kind of horror commentary and humor. I still think there's a lot of weak points when it comes to a lot of the other characters in here just aren't fleshed out or interesting at all, but I think I'm going to have it in maybe like middle ground, like B tier. I think that feels good. It's, yeah, still not my favorite, not my favorite horror comedy, not my favorite found footage, not my favorite melding of those two together, but I think that there's clearly a lot of love for the horror genre here, some really great acting, especially from Leslie's actor. And yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had in there. Up next is a movie you're gonna have zero fun with, Possession, but I don't give a shit. It's going all the way up to the S tier. Let's put it like right here. Feels good, right behind Rosemary's Baby. Maybe even, yeah, fuck you, Roman. Let's go with this. Yeah, this is a hell of a watch. It's certainly not gonna be for everyone, but it is such an iconic, uncomfortable, kind of, it's definitely scary in its own way film. It's Isabelle Adjani and Sam Neill at both of their very best. This film like kind of broke them a while the way it did Shelley Duvall in The Shining, and it's just due to the intensity of their performances. It's very theatrical. There's maybe some overacting going on and a lot of interesting movement throughout the film when it comes to characters, but it is so creepy and strange, and on a first watch you definitely don't know where this thing is going, and it is very influential on other body horror, very sexual horror films, and it was really a direct influence for the Untamed, which is on here, so it's proven to be really important. And shot in Germany while the Berlin Wall and the Cold War were still up. So much crazy history going on. It is such a cool piece of filmmaking and just a really incredible piece of art as well. So I definitely understand if you aren't as crazy about Possession, but I really freaking love it. Cool. Up next we have Trick or Treat, not the 2000s Halloween themed one. This is the 1980s rock and roll one. I guess that's a good way to describe it. This one's fun. I think it's another one that is kind of a product of its time, like late-ish, mid-70s, or not 70s, mid-80s, and I think that it shows off like some of those early digital effects that you'd see in something like Hellraiser that don't necessarily look the best. I think that there's some issues with maybe some of the actors' ability, but there's still so much fun to be had here through the different music sequences, all of the rock legends coming in for fun little cameos, and still a lot to appreciate here. It's something that I had never watched before my review of it, and so it's not something I have nostalgia for. It's definitely going to appeal more to people that got to see it in theaters. It's certainly a time capsule kind of movie, which will make it maybe not the best for like new horror film addicts to go and watch. I think there won't be as much there for people that weren't there in the 80s to appreciate that music that's so central to this story and theme and vibe, but I still think there's a lot of fun to be had with it. So I'll put it in. I think it still deserves to go into the beats here as well. Maybe somewhere around here with like, I'm gonna put it just above Leslie Vernon. I think that makes sense. Ooh, now we're getting to one of our only 2024 horror films with All You Need Is Blood. And yes, this is a really fun zombie comedy, drama, romance. It's got a lot going on, but I think it, unlike whichever movie I was describing as juggling and kind of dropping some of the plates, this one I think is managing to hold it all together. It's certainly got a lot of elements you've seen before, but I think it really does what it's trying to do well. It pays a lot of love to the horror and zombie genre, as well as filmmaking in general, and has a character that really has a nice character arc in the lead and some very fun zombie effects as well. And I was glad to see they get kind of funky with it near the end. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think it's definitely worth checking out. So I think I'll go ahead and put this one in. We'll put it in B tier as well, maybe like right behind like Vicious Fun, and in here with Deathgasm. I think similar vein of films with these three, so I think that it makes sense in that family. Ooh, up next we have Misery, which I just reviewed, and Misery is like teetering on S tier for me, but I think I'm gonna keep it like right at the bottom or right at the top of the A tier. I think somewhere around there makes sense for it. It is super duper effective at what it's doing. It is such a claustrophobic movie and so fun to just watch the character of Annie bounce around from calm and motherly to hysterical and murderous and brutal. And yeah, just a great piece of acting between two fantastic actors. Yeah, I think that it is one of the very best Stephen King adaptations when it comes to films. So I think it's like right up there, like a little bit below The Shining as far as the craft of filmmaking and all of that goes, but still a really great use of setting. Some really great dark humor in there as well. So yeah, I really, really love Misery. Oh, here's another one I'm tempted to put in the S tier with Life Force. I think I'm gonna hold back and keep it in A, but my God, this is such a bizarre fucking film. It's Hooper really synthesizing a lot of his favorite things together. You've got just vampires, aliens, demons, boobs, all kinds of Hollywood excess going into this, and yeah, strange, unlikable military type guy characters, beautiful women characters, just a lot of commentary on what dumb men will do when they are faced with something that they can't control. I think there's a lot more going on under the surface, but it comes off as kind of like this vapid, crazy fucking thing. I'm losing my words for this one, but yeah, it's a very compelling, strange film, and fun to see. It's really fun to see Tobe Hooper like going back to his exploitation kind of roots with this one and bringing in those uncomfortable sexual components. I think that there's maybe some like miscasting with some of the leads in here, and there's so much going on that sometimes things get a little lost in translation, but I really think that there's something special going on in this film as well. And then we have Street Trash. This review actually hasn't come out yet, at least on the day that I'm recording this. I'm not sure which one's gonna come out first, but just watched it and wrote the script. And yeah, Street Trash is it's such a mixed bag for me, not necessarily in quality, but as far as the content goes, it is one of those films that is like out to be as edgy and offensive and as funny as possible all at the same time. And some of it works really fucking well, and some of it does not work at all for me. There are points where the sleaziness goes way too far, like what I was talking about with Basket Case, where I think it like holds that line well. There are moments in here that are relatively played for laughs that I'm not comfortable with, but then there's things that are like just slightly less bad that I think are hilarious. So I don't know, it's like a good one that's exercising really gross out, sleazy comedy, but then it's also going so far that it's making you uncomfortable and almost queasy. So I think it's a really interesting piece of filmmaking for that reason. It's not like just out to make you laugh, it's out to create this gross world that you're kind of forced to reckon with. And yeah, I think I haven't really gone through all of my fleshed out thoughts and haven't written that part of the review yet, but I think I'm gonna put it like low A tier right now. It's, yeah, very strange, and it's for people, if you enjoy something like The Toxic Avenger and you haven't seen Street Trash, go watch it. I think it'll be right up your alley. It has some really crazy practical effects, some really strange characters, but if you're maybe sensitive or you're not interested in a movie that's not going to be politically correct, I would say stay far away from Street Trash. Sweet, now we're getting into the first 4 Texas Chainsaw films. So you're kind of getting a sneak peek into how I'll eventually rank the whole franchise. But if you have ever seen one of my rankings before or know me at all, you know the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my favorite horror film of all time. So it is going straight up to the tippy top of what's your favorite scary movie, which is exactly where it belongs. I know it's not everyone's favorite scary movie, but it's mine. I think it's a fantastic, terrifying piece of cinema. Such a fantastic environment. The feeling of that sweaty Texas filthy heat you can feel in the sun, the bones, the feathers, every little gross thing you find in this film, and I absolutely love it. Please go watch my review of it. I'm like gushing about the film the whole time, and yeah, just love it, love it, love it. But then we get into the rest of the franchise. I still really enjoy TCM2. I love seeing Tobe Hooper go in a really different direction. I think somewhere in here makes sense. I think it is not hitting the same high notes as the original for me, but I love how he's subverting our own expectations for what a sequel will look like and basically mocks what all the rest of the sequels go on to become. It's super smart, super funny, and Stretch is one of my favorite final girls of all time, and yeah, I think that high A tier is definitely where it belongs. Then we get to these two. So we've got Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which I'm definitely going to put down in... I think C tier is fair for it. I think that it can go like... Yeah, right here I think is a good spot for it behind like the lower Phantasm movies. It is fine. It's just a super forgettable slasher with not much interesting to say. It's mostly just a retread of what we've seen before, and it's got a few fun things like the big old chainsaw. You get Viggo Mortensen here, but there's so many other films that fill this niche that I would watch before this one. And then let me double down on that and put part 4, The Next Gen, right into F tier as well, or even behind Jason Takes Manhattan. It's a terrible film. I can understand if you like it and have fun with it. It could be so bad it's good for some people, but not for me. It's such a fall from grace from where we started to where we've gotten with this film. And you get Renee Zellweger doing fine, I guess. You get Matthew McConaughey doing whatever the fuck he's doing in this one. You get super feminine Leatherface in this one. So there's like interesting things going on, but it's not scary. It's supposed to be a horror comedy. It's not really that funny. The Illuminati plot is fucking stupid. There's not much I really think is good in this film, except for Darla? Not Darla. The lady in the purple power suit. I love her, but that's really like the only thing that I think this movie adds. There's really just so much dumb shit going on. All right, so those are all the movies that I've actually reviewed, but now we've got 12 bonus movies in here. Let me run through them real quick. We've got Night of the Demons, classic. Woman of the Hour, which came out this year. It's, I believe it was produced, directed, and it starred Anna Kendrick, and it's kind of like a retelling of The Dating Game Killer, if anyone's familiar. We have The Stranger, which was also a 2024 film, if you can call it that. It was actually like a web series, so a bunch of different episodes that then got smushed together into a film. We have The Beast Within, which is also 2024. It's Kit Harington from Game of Thrones. He's a werewolf. We've got The Ruins, which I think was from the 2010s, and it's basically some characters that, I don't know if it's like South America. I don't want to be wrong about that, but somewhere like Central South America, they go to the top of a pyramid, and there's a interesting flora and fauna that begin affecting them. I'll leave it at that. We've got Eaten Alive, another Tobe Hooper classic. Ouija Shark, which is everything you're probably expecting something called Ouija Shark to be. Clear Cut, which is a really, really interesting film about, basically there's this lawyer that is working with a group of Native Americans. I believe it's all taking place in Canada, and is trying to help them protect their land from being bought by like a big logging company, and they're going to cut down all of the forests, and things happen from there. It's one of the films that if you have not seen it, absolutely go watch it. I do not want to spoil it. It's really, really good. We have The Lazarus Effect. Mark Duplass is in this one, and pretty familiar, kind of almost similar to Flatliners, actually, where character dies, comes back, isn't quite themselves, and hijinks ensue from there. Then we've got Wolf Creek with a good old Mick Taylor. Yeah, super gritty, violent, unpleasant kind of film. The Rental, which I might be making up, is it directed by, I think it was directed by James Franco's brother, whatever the fuck his name is. And yeah, so people go and rent a cool like condo kind of place for the weekend or whatever, and not good things happen from there. And finally, we got Longlegs. So yeah, let me see. How are we gonna rank these bad boys? Night of the Demons, definitely going into A. Where do you belong? We'll put you like middle of the tier. A, I think, is a good place for it. Yeah, very grimy, trashy fun. You got Linnea Quigley having a good time here as she does on her 80s horror films. And yeah, just a lot of gross, cool practical effects and some very fun Deadite-esque demons here. Woman of the Hour I thought was pretty solid. I think that it's familiar in the kind of like serial killer retelling, but I think it's also familiar in that it's really trying to put the voice of the survivors and the victims first instead of idolizing the killer, which I think has been trending more and more through the years, as opposed to something that really creates an icon out of the killers. I think Anna Kendrick does a really great job in her performance, as well as the other actresses, as well as the guy playing, I don't remember the killer's name, but the dating game killer, and does an interesting job of not fully making him just like this evil monster as well, though. So I think it can go into the B tier as well. It's kind of hard to place amongst other things, as it's the closest thing to like a documentary, I suppose. We'll just put it right behind Compliance. The Stranger, unfortunately, was pretty bad. It's kind of hard to get into all the reasons why, but because it was a bunch of different episodes, the tone and the plot is kind of really shifting all of the time. Like every 15 minutes, it feels like you're watching a different movie, which sounds interesting. I promise you, it's really not. There are some insane plot choices in here that just don't make any sense. So I'm gonna put it down here in the D tier. We'll just put it at the end because it's not something I'm ever gonna seek out again. Unfortunately, I think The Beast Within is also gonna go into D tier. It's just a really drab werewolf movie. You've seen something like it before. You don't need to really go see this one. The Ruins was actually a big surprise for me, though. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it because I did not know where this film was. I didn't know what the fuck it was about when I put it on, and I was pleasantly surprised with it. I'm gonna put it like pretty high B tier. I think that's a fine spot for it. I'd definitely say go give it a watch if you haven't seen it. Eaten Alive's tricky. It's like on that very sleazy end of things that sometimes make me a little uncomfortable, but I think there's still so much strange shit going on. You've got a super young Freddy Krueger in here. You've got obviously a big ass crocodile. This film was super inspirational to especially like Ty West and what he would go on to do with X and Pearl. And yeah, some really great use of color and setting in here. And yeah, just some interesting horror exploitation from Tobe Hooper. I think, put it like, it's still not something I feel like especially passionate about. Like I would take Life Force or both of the Texas Chainsaws over it. So I'll put it like pretty high A tier as well, right behind Friday 2. Surprise, Ouija Shark was unfortunately an F. It was not good. Belongs in the garbage. Clear Cut is definitely going in A. I think it's also a film that's like not like a horror movie. It's definitely doing its own thing. It's not out to scare you, but there are some pretty scary, horrific things that take place. But similar to A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, there is a very, very strong, important message that especially during this time you were not seeing in very many films. So I have nothing but respect for the film. The lead actors do a fantastic job, and yeah, 10 out of 10, go give it a watch. The Lazarus Effect, I wish I liked more, but it's kind of like gateway teeny bopper horror. I think it was PG-13 and it feels like it. It's not really scary. There's a couple good scares in there where like a character comes out of the dark and things like that, but it gets kind of off the rails at the end. Almost feels like Firestarter or something like that, where there's a lot of superpowers going on, and that's where it kind of loses me. So yeah, I think that it goes in there here. It's here. It's fine. Wolf Creek is interesting. Wolf Creek is unpleasant as hell, but I think it's doing what it's doing really well. It's creating a disgusting fucking antagonist with Mick Taylor, but he's also super invigorating in an Art the Clown kind of way. Like, you love to hate him. So yeah, I think he'll go like pretty, maybe like definitely A tier. I'm debating where he goes. I think above Midnight Meat Train, that's for sure. put him like right after Basket Case. I think, yeah, it's an unpleasant watch. I think they do a great job of unveiling how fucking vile he is. He starts off as just this funny little Australian guy coming out to help you, but then it goes and takes a dark turn. And also love just the use of like atmosphere and landscape. Like the environment plays a big role in this film. It's not like full on schlock and gore the whole time. It's kind of artsy, which is really nice. Then we have The Rental. The Rental is fine. The Rental's, yeah, C tier. It's also something you've seen before. It's not, it's pretty good. We'll put it like decently high C tier. But yeah, I think it's something you've seen before. They're similar to what I was talking about with Rosemary's Baby. There's lots of films that have taken like, there's something not quite right with this apartment. What's going on? Are we being watched? Is someone in here with us? I don't know. Well, something's happening. So go check it out if you're. I think it's a good kind of watch if you're in the mood for something like that. It's a niche kind of horror film, so I think it fits a specific role nicely, and it does it pretty well. But it's not a film I feel especially passionate about. And finally, we have Longlegs. So this is like one of the only like big name 2024 movies to make it into this list today. And Longlegs, I think, is gonna be like, I think it's like a decent B tier movie. I think put it right behind the original Friday. I think that's a fine spot for it. I think this is another divisive one. A lot of people either loved Longlegs or hated it. I thought it was fine. I thought it was solid, but it was a weird experience. It feels like it wants to be art house, but it's a little too like slashery and comedic, but it's also like not doing either of those things enough either. It's a weird mishmash of things. I really loved like the first half of the film, but then it gets a little off the rails with the puppets and the satanic ritual stuff, and I don't know, it felt a little muddled to me. I think I really love Micah Monroe, and Nicolas Cage can be fun. I think I'm kind of overseeing him in like 3 horror movies every year though. I think this could have easily just been some unrecognizable actor, and I think that might have been better in my opinion. I think that I can never not see him as Nicolas Cage and his classic like over the top acting. So I think that there's only some movies can handle that, and I don't think Longlegs was that movie. So yeah, I think B tier is a fine place to put it. It was still one of my preferred movies of the year, but it wasn't like a top highlight for me. But there you have it. That is 80 horror films ranked. I think that this is overall a pretty good spread of things. I think I maybe went a little easy. There weren't too many that went into Garbage Day or Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. Most films ended up in the A or B categories, which I think I stand by. I mostly have covered solid horror films over the past 2 years, so I think that they belong here. I don't want to like bring films down into tiers they don't belong to even the list out or anything, but yeah, I think if you haven't seen Texas Chainsaw, The Shining, Possession, Rosemary's Baby, An American Werewolf, Audition, Brain Dead, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, or Phantasm, absolutely go give those films a watch. They absolutely demand to be seen, and I think every single one is a masterpiece, or if not like very close to a masterpiece. And then yeah, everything else in A tier is definitely worth a watch. Even pretty much everything in B tier, I'd say go give it a watch as well. I've really been spoiled by the franchises that we've chosen to do, as well as the movies my patrons have been having me watch. Sometimes every once in a while they decide to give me a real piece of shit to watch, but mostly it's good shit. So I'm relatively happy with the movies I've been able to cover, and yeah, happy with what I've been able to do over the past 2 years with these films. Definitely let me know what you think of these films. Are there any favorites that you think I misplaced or put too low? Anything that I maybe should bring down a rung or two? Let me know down below. I'm always happy to discuss like which movies are your favorites, which are the greatest of all time. Maybe there's an element in one of these I wasn't considering that should amp it up a level. Let me know what you think down below. But yeah, this is a fun way to start off the year of 2025. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun reviews coming up. If Street Trash isn't out now, it's gonna be coming out very soon, and then we'll be getting back to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the 2003 remake, which I think will be a lot of fun. And yeah, we'll be doing Texas Chainsaw through a good chunk of the rest of this year, along with some patron requests, and then we'll leave the rest of the year a bit of a mystery for now. Gotta have something to keep y'all coming back. But yeah, I hope y'all have a wonderful start to this year so far. Once again, Happy New Year, and thanks so much for tuning in. I know this is definitely on the longer end of the kinds of videos I do, so I hope y'all enjoyed this ranking video. And yeah, thank you so much for watching Hamburgers and Horror. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and yeah, stay safe out there. Thanks for watching me rank 80 fucking horror movies. I don't know how long the final video is gonna be, but this took about 2 hours to do, so thank you if you've made it this far. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, I would really appreciate it. And be sure to check out my Patreon account if you're interested in supporting the channel further. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel, so you'll get a lot of direct say in what kind of content I make. But yeah, thanks so much for your time and have a great night.